The wind howled through the frozen silence, a voice like ancient wolves snarling over the white waste. Sergeant Elias Knox trudged forward, each step a protest against the deep, bone-snapping cold. His breath steamed in the dim twilight of Iris 7, a distant moon gripped in eternal winter. The planet had no cities, no songs, no self-comforts, only a research station, 2 dead scientists, and a signal too strange to ignore. They'd called it a heat pulse, something no machine should have emitted beneath the miles-thick glaciers. A warmth like breath from a buried god. When the distress signal cut off, Knox had volunteered for retrieval. Now, 3 days into the mission, something else gnawed at him, something more than fatigue, more than the aching silence. It was the feeling of being watched, as though the snow itself remembered things. He stopped at the mouth of a collapsed cavern where the signal had last flared. The ice walls pulsed faintly, veins of old energy glowing like heartbeats. The sensors buzzed sporadic heat spikes, the kind that didn't make sense in terrain this cold. He dropped to one knee and began to dig. The ice fought him, clinging to secrets it didn't want unearthed, but his gloves burned hot through the frozen crust. An hour passed, then another. Then he found fingers small, blue, and trembling, not machine. Not metal, flesh. He fell back. Heart racing, his body screaming at the shock. But she was there, unmistakable. A girl. No older than 15 by human standards. Her skin shimmered like starlight beneath thin frost. Her hair was silver white, tangled with crystal dust. Her eyes, though shut, seemed swollen with nightmares. She was buried, yes, but not dead. Knox didn't stop to think. He wrapped her in his insulated coat, pressing her small body against the warm plates on his chest. Her skin was so cold it hurt to touch. His visor beeped. Her vitals were weak, flickering like dying candlelight. Whoever she was, she wasn't built for this kind of sleep. She'd been trapped, maybe for years, maybe centuries. No ID, no implants. No tags, no CO stat. He opened the comm line. Command, I have a girl, alien, possibly sentient. Alive, I repeat, alive. Silence, static, then copy. Evac protocol in 36 hours. Weather spike inbound. You're on your own until extraction. He stared at the fragile creature in his arms. 36 hours in a snow-locked tomb. She wasn't going to make it, not without help. He carried her into the wrecked facility nearby. Most systems were dead, but one stasis bed flickered, barely functional. He bypassed the med scan. He didn't know what she was, what species, what her biology needed. But he knew one thing: she needed warmth. And he had it. He tore open his suit, pressed her icy form against his bare chest, and curled around her in that humming cradle of half-dead tech. He whispered old stories, nonsense tales about Earth's deserts, the smell of sun-heated stone, the way birds danced over orange skies. He didn't know if she heard. He just knew she was shaking less, her fingers twitched. Her breath, once ragged, was starting to sync with his own. Outside, the storm arrived, a titan of snow and sound slamming the world shut. The white walls moaned, and the ice shifted. Inside that small, broken shell of warmth, humanity and something not human shared a breath, a heartbeat. There was no trust yet, no understanding, no promise. Just one soldier refusing to let a stranger die cold and forgotten beneath the sky that never gave light. The night dragged on. He could feel her bones beneath her skin, hollow and strange. But her pulse thin and slow refused to give in. Her forehead touched his, and something ancient bloomed behind his eyes. A memory not his own. A battlefield of stars. A scream without sound. And a plea dot helped me dot his throat closed. His hand tightened around her fingers. And as the storm howled herder, Sergeant Elias Knox whispered into the dark, "I've got you. I don't know who you are, but I've got you. You're not dying today. Asterisk, the storm had no voice, only the rumble of 1,000 angry ghosts outside, pressing their frozen weight against the fragile shell of the ruin. The stasis cradle hummed low, its weak field barely holding, flickering like a candle about to drown in its own wax. Inside it, Elias Knox remained motionless, wrapped around the girl like a shield of flesh and fire. His skin had gone numb hours ago, lips cracked, lungs thick with the sterile sting of recycled air and bitter cold. Still he held her. Her breathing, faint as snowflakes landing on glass, had steadied to a rhythm he dared to hope meant life. But she had not opened her eyes. Not yet. He wasn't trained for this. He was no xenobiologist, no diplomat. He was a soldier taught to extract, to survive, to obey. Yet when he looked at her face, too delicate for any battlefield, he couldn't reconcile the war-born instincts with the flood of something gentler. Protection, compassion. It wasn't strategic. It was something older, buried in the marrow of humankind. The primal need to save the helpless, even when they were not your kind. Her skin had begun to lose its icy translucence, gaining instead a soft opalescent glow like fire behind frost. He had shed more layers, giving her everything warm he could afford. When his own blood cooled to a sluggish crawl, when hallucinations crept into the edges of his vision, he didn't pull away. He sang instead. Broken, tuneless songs from childhood. Songs about rain, about spring, about green things growing through cracked concrete. He didn't know if she understood words, but something responded, tiny shifts in her fingers, small flutters beneath closed lids, and then, without warning, she moved Dot. It was slight, almost imperceptible. Her hand, so light he hadn't even felt. The weight of it reached toward the center of his chest and pressed against his sternum. Her touch burned, not with heat, but memory. His body tensed, heart skipping. In an instant, a surge of something foreign coursed through him, not pain. Not electricity, but knowing. It was like drowning in someone else's sorrow. He saw a cold galaxy crumbling, a ship spiraling, voices screaming in a language he didn't know, but somehow mourned. He saw her, a child alone in a pod, hidden beneath glaciers that bury her. People's last hope. And he felt her fear, not of death, but of being forgotten. He gasped, falling back, breaking the contact. She lay still again, her brow twitching. Her lips blue and brittle murmured one syllable. Warm. It wasn't just sound. It was telepathy, a whisper inside the folds of his thoughts, shaped like a voice but weightless, unspoken. Hiss. Heart squeezed. He leaned in again, took her hand. I'm here, he said hoarsely. You're safe. You're not alone anymore. The storm outside didn't care. It crushed the world with its blizzard fists. But inside that cocoon of ruined metal and failing systems, something fragile had sparked. She opened her eyes. One, at first, then the other. They glowed like twin stars, pale violet with no pupils, rimmed with liquid light. When they met his, they widened, startled but not afraid. She tried to speak aloud, but her throat rasped with silence. Elias placed a finger gently over her lips. Don't, save your strength, but she didn't listen. Her mind spoke again, brushing against his with all the softness of a dream. Why? He blinked. Why what? Why do you give warmth? He struggled for words. How could you explain human? Instinct is something not born of earth, not shaped by grief or empathy in the same way. But then he remembered his sister Anna dying from the fever during the Mars Outpost blackout. He remembered holding her hand through the night, not because it could save her, but because dying alone was worse, because no one should freeze. Alone, he whispered, because we're human. She blinked again, slow and thoughtful, as though she weighed that word like a stone in her palm. Human, he nodded. Yeah, that's us. Messy, loud, stubborn. But we don't let people go cold. Not if we can help it. She closed her eyes again, not in sleep, but peace. For the first time, her body stopped trembling. The energy around her pulsed faintly. A breath, drawn from the deep well of her being, touched the air like the first scent of spring after endless frost. Then her thoughts again. You burned for me. That is rare. He smiled through the haze of exhaustion. You're worth it. And even if the storm didn't break, even if the facility collapsed, even if command never came, Elias Knox knew he had already done something meaningful. He had chosen to burn, not to destroy, but to warm a stranger from the stars. And maybe, just maybe, that made him more than a soldier. Asterisk. The hours melted together like falling snow on metal soft, slow, vanishing before they were ever counted. The storm had passed in name only, leaving behind a world not calmer but quieter, smothered beneath a deeper cold. The facility's solar grid was fractured, its power reserves bleeding out into systems too broken to revive. Elias Knox knew the countdown had begun. They had 20 hours left before the last generator failed, and after that, no warmth, no light, no shelter. But she was awake now. She was awake, and that changed everything. She sat with her back pressed against the inner curve of the stasis pod, wrapped in every layer he could find. Her legs were tucked to her chest, arms folded tight, and still she shivered. Her eyes roamed. The space slow, cautious, like she was afraid the room would vanish if she looked too long. Elias watched her from across the pod, chewing on a protein bar he could barely taste. He didn't speak yet. He didn't want to break the fragile stillness between them. Then her voice came not aloud, but brushing gently inside his thoughts, like wind rippling across still water. You are not frightened of me, Dot? He shook his head slowly. I was. At first, but now, no. You're just a girl, aren't you? Her head tilted, curious. I was not always alone. I remember warmth. I remember home. Something in her expression shifted, tightening around the eyes. Elias leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. What happened to it? Your home? She didn't answer, not directly. Instead, she reached out one pale, trembling hand and placed her fingers on the bulkhead wall beside her. A faint pulse of light spiraled out from the contact point, an echo, like a visual memory etched in the metal. Elias watched in awe as shapes danced across the surface, a silver city beneath twin moons, towering spires lit with floating fire, children laughing with hands full of glowing feathers. Then the light dimmed, the spires cracked. Fire turned to shadow. Ships rang from the sky like broken wings. Silence followed. Deep and merciless, her hand fell away. She curled in on herself again. I was hidden, my mind wrapped in ice. The last memory I have is screaming. Elias didn't know what to say. No words could ease that kind of loss. But he reached out, placing his hand over hers. His fingers were rough, calloused, smeared with grime. Hers were smooth like porcelain, cold even now. But she didn't pull away. She let him hold on. Lost people too, he said after a long silence. My sister. She was 12. She got sick when Mars went dark. I stayed with her till the end, held her hand, told her stories I'd already told a dozen times. But she liked the sound of my voice, said it made the cold quieter. Her eyes met his then, wide and filled with something that shimmered, not tears, not exactly, but emotion so deep and alien that it trembled against the edge of language. You understand the hollow? Yeah, he whispered. We all do. Every human's got a hole inside them from someone they loved too much and lost too soon. She leaned forward slightly, hands tightening in her blanket. Why do you keep going? If pain follows you, if loss is part of you, why not stop moving? Why not turn to ice like me? Elias thought about it. Not the kind of thought that dances on the surface, but the kind that digs deep into old scars. Because we hope, he said. It's stupid sometimes. It hurts. But we hope. That's what we do. That's what makes us human. She closed her eyes, breathing in that word again. Human. She didn't say it like a name anymore, but like a prayer. Elias stood, crossed the few feet between them, and gently sat beside her. She didn't flinch. Her shoulder brushed his. He could feel her cold soaking into him, but it didn't matter. He draped his last emergency blanket over them, both forming a tent of fragile warmth in that shattered place. They sat in silence, sharing each other's presence like old friends, like kin who had walked through fire and frost to arrive at the same place of stillness. I do not want to be alone again, she told him. You won't be, he said, meaning it. Dot, and then, for the first time, she smiled. It was small, unsure, but it was there. A smile from something not human, given to someone who barely understood her, but had offered everything anyway. For Elias Knox, that was enough. Asterisk. The hours passed with quiet intimacy, the kind forged in survival and sealed in silence. Elias and the girl who had no name he could pronounce, only a flickering pulse of meaning that felt like Sarah when he shaped it with his thoughts shared more than heat now. They shared memories, hopes, loneliness. Sometimes she would reach out and place her hand near his temple, gently asking permission. And when he nodded, she would show him her world in fragments like dreams half remembered, full of light and fire and sorrow. Other times, he would talk long rambling stories about Earth, about sand that got between your toes, about birds that fought for crumbs in park benches, about music that could make your chest ache for no reason. But something had changed. Sarah's strength was growing. He could feel it in the way her skin no longer trembled under his hand, in the steadiness of her breath, in the brightness of her gaze. Yet there was something else too. A tension, like a wire stretched too tight in a quiet room. She grew distant, at times glancing toward the walls, listening as though the ice itself were whispering. He noticed the glow in her palms would sometimes spark without her meaning to, and once, only once, she flinched when he mentioned the word military. That was when he knew. She wasn't just a survivor. She was something more. That night, while she rested, though she'd never truly slept, he scoured the half-functional console, bypassing encrypted logs left behind by the research team. Most of it was garbage, garbled recordings, temperature charts, desperate messages cut off mid-sentence. But one file was still intact. Classified under Altair Red, it took him 2 hours and the last of the generator's backup charge to force. It opened Dot, and when he saw what they had found, his hands trembled. The heat pulse that led the first team here had not come from a signal, not from any beacon. It had come from a failed containment surge. Something had triggered the ancient defense system within the ice. They had drilled too far, broken into a vault buried beneath the glacier, no natural formation, but a sealed cryo chamber the size of a cathedral. And inside, they'd found not just Sarah, but weapons. Thousands of them. Not guns. Not missiles. Living weapons. Biological entities frozen in time. Creatures engineered for war. The report called them Sunsung Seraphim, and claimed they were the final creation of a now-dead race called the Talratha. Civilization annihilated by internal rebellion and something called the Silence Wars. The scientists had awakened. Only one Sarah by accident. The others remained entombed, slumbering beneath the station like sleeping gods. She was not a child. She was a failsafe. And the moment her life signs stabilized, the vault had begun to warm again. Elias stared at the screen, cold horror crawling down his spine. The timer, the temperature, all of it had been moving steadily upward, not by design, by instinct. The defense systems dormant from millennia had sensed her recovery. They were waking the others. One by one, he turned, breath ragged, to where she lay curled beneath the blankets. Her eyes were already open. She had seen it too. Felt it. Her voice, when it entered his mind, was quieter than he had ever heard. I did not know. I did not remember. Until now that she stood slowly, stepping toward him. Light shimmered across her skin like molten glass. Not hostile, but vast. Larger than her small frame had ever suggested. Elias stepped back. You're not human, he said. You're not even just a girl. Your eye was made to sing the end of empires. She touched her chest, her expression filled with regret so deep. It shook him. But I was also made to feel, and that they did not predict that Elias didn't know whether to run or embrace her. His body screamed at him to escape. His heart whispered something else. She wasn't the enemy. Not yet, but soon if the others woke, she wouldn't be alone. And if they were like her, but not changed by humanity, not warmed by kindness, not shaped by sorrow, then humanity wouldn't survive their first step onto this moon. What happens if they wake up? He asked. Quietly, she looked at him, and in that look was the weight of stars collapsing. They will not understand. They will remember only what they were told, that all things outside our kind are threats. They will burn this world to ash to complete their final command. He stared at the screen. 12 hours until the vault breached. Command would arrive in 16. Elias turned back to Sarah, his voice hoarse. Can you stop it? Her eyes dimmed. I do not know, but you want to. She nodded, trembling. Because I burned in your arms. Because you sang to me. Because you gave me warmth when I was nothing but silence. He took a breath, the deepest breath of his life. Then we try. And in that broken, dying outpost, a human and a weapon built by long-dead gods made a pact, not with words, not with oaths, but with the fire of choice. Asterisk. The ground trembled beneath their feet. A pulse like the heartbeat of something ancient and angry echoing up through the ice. Elias stood at the edge of the outpost's lower deck, staring into the chasm that had split the subfloor clean in half. It hadn't been there yesterday. The vault was rising, and with it, the heat, the unrelenting warmth of rebirth. The sensors were blind now, short-circuited by proximity to the energy surging from below. He no longer needed machines to tell him what was happening. The air itself had changed. It buzzed. It shivered. The silence wasn't silent anymore. It whispered in low frequencies, like breath held too long finally exhaled. Sarah stood beside him, her silver-white hair stirring even without wind. Her hands were clenched, small tremors running through her arms. The fire inside her had grown brighter. She looked almost human now, but not quite. Too smooth, too symmetrical. And her eyes, still beautiful now, burned faintly like dying stars. I can feel them. She whispered aloud this time, her voice brittle as frost on metal. They're dreaming again, the others. I don't know how many. I don't know how long until they wake fully. But they are not like me, Elias. They never knew warmth. They never knew kindness. They will awaken hungry for purpose, for destruction. Elias didn't flinch. He'd heard similar words in war. Soldiers who'd been trained too long, too hard, stripped of everything but their function. Kill, obey, repeat. The difference was those men had a choice once. These beings, they had only programming. Until Sarah. Then we don't let them wake, he said. Her eyes widened. You mean to destroy the vault? It's that, or let them rise. They're not just weapons, Sarah. They're extinction-level threats. And if command gets here after the breach, it'll be too late. I saw the file, what they were planning. They didn't want to rescue you. They wanted to contain you. Dissect you. Use you. Sarah nodded slowly, eyes darkening. I felt it in the walls. The scientists here. They were afraid of me, afraid of what I might become. So they tried to erase what I was, piece by piece, until only the shell remained. Elias reached forward and touched her cheek, that you became something else. Someone else. Because you were shown a choice, you burned and chose mercy instead of hate. Her voice dropped to a whisper, and if I help you destroy the vault, I'll be destroying the last of my kind. Elias didn't answer right away. The weight of that truth coiled inside him like a slow knife. He could see it in her face, how she wore her loneliness like a second skin. Even with him near, she carried the ache of being the last, and now she would be the one to end the rest. No species should have to make that decision. I won't make you, he said at last. But if they wake, it won't just be Earth that dies. It'll be every world they touch. And if command gets hold of them, they'll do what humans always do with things they fear. Turn them into weapons for our own wars. Tears glimmered. In her eyes, liquid starlight pooling and falling in perfect silence. You ask me to kill my dreams. I ask you to save lives, he said gently. She turned her back to him, arms folded around herself. There is a way, a node at the vault's heart. It controls the cryo-sequence, but I must connect with it fully, not just to speak, but to fuse. If I do that, I won't come back. Elias's breath caught in his throat. You'll die? She nodded, not in pain. I'll go back to sleep in a way, but I won't wake again. He took a step toward her. Then we find another way. There isn't one, she whispered. I was made to command them. Only I can shut them down without triggering a surge that takes this moon with it. She turned back to him, face streaked with tears. But I don't want to leave this world. I just found it. I found you. The storm inside Elias broke. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, fiercely, as though he could press his heartbeat into hers and keep her anchored. His voice cracked. Then stay. Choose yourself. Let them wake, and we'll fight. I'll protect you, even if it kills me. She looked up at him, wonder and sorrow carved into every line of her face. You would burn again, for me? He nodded. Every time. Then she kissed his cheek, featherlight, and something ancient passed between them. Not lust, not romance. Something deeper, recognition. I was born for war, she whispered, stepping away, her light growing. But you were born for love. And before he could speak, she turned and vanished into the vault below, her body fading into a trail of light, her thoughts echoing one last time in his mind. Tell your people we were more than weapons. Tell them. We loved once too. Elias fell to his knees, fists clenched, tears frozen on his cheeks as the vault roared with fire. And beneath the glacier, the heartbeat still asterisk the sky above Iris 7, was beginning to clear, layers of storm peeled back like old wounds slowly healing. Jagged cracks split the landscape where the vault had begun to rise before Sarah descended. But now the glacier stood still again, like a god holding its breath. No more tremors. No more heat pulses. Only silence deep, eerie, and absolute. Elias Knox sat on the ridge above the ruins, wrapped in the last remnants of his thermal cloak, watching the crater where she had vanished. His lips were chapped, skin wind-burned and peeling, but he didn't feel it. His entire being was hollowed, out, scraped raw by grief so sharp it hadn't even begun to bleed. He hadn't moved in hours. He couldn't. Somewhere beneath his feet, she had made the impossible choice, the one no soldier should ever have to make. She had walked into the heart of her own kind's tomb and shut the door behind her, knowing it would never open again. She had died without war, without violence, without command. She had died as herself. As Isit RH. And then the ships came, The sky shimmered with artificial light as human dropships pierced the atmosphere's sleek, angular things with hungry sensors, and the kind of silence that came before a different kind of storm. Elias stood slowly, gripping the flare baton in his glove. He raised it high, igniting a red streak that flared through the freezing wind. The first ship landed in a hiss of steam and engine growl, and within seconds the boots hit the snow half a dozen. Armored, weapons drawn, visors cold. The lead officer approached, helmet off, expression unreadable. She was older, high-ranking, her eyes full of calculation. "Sergeant Knox," she said, "we received your emergency ping." The signal indicated non-human contact. Where is the subject? Elias didn't blink. Gone, her brow furrowed. Elaborate. She sacrificed herself to shut down the vault. You were wrong about them, about her. The woman's gaze narrowed. The vault's sensors were climbing steadily, and then they stopped. There was an energy surge massive. Are you telling me the alien weapon is neutralized? He didn't answer directly, just nodded once, slowly. She looked down at the crater, visibly frustrated. We'll need to extract samples. Recover what we can. You should prepare for debrief. But Elias took a step forward, his voice low and firm. There's nothing left to take. She made sure of it. If you go down there, you'll find ashes, and maybe ghosts. The officer crossed her arms. You sympathize with it. That much is clear. Your report will be reviewed accordingly. If your action's compromised, I saved you, Elias snapped. All of you, she did. And you want to pick apart her bones like she was nothing but a tool we failed to control. But she wasn't a weapon. She was a person. And she chose us, even after we abandoned her once already. There was a silence between them, then cold, tight and sharp as broken ice. The other soldiers shifted uneasily, glancing toward the crater. Finally, the officer exhaled. We'll proceed with caution. You'll remain on site during recovery. He said nothing, just turned away, and as the crew began setting up scan towers and perimeter drones, Elias returned to the edge of the crater. He knelt, took off his glove, and touched the snow with bare fingers. It burned with cold, but he didn't move. Hey, he whispered into the quiet. They're gonna come down there. They'll search, prod, maybe even try to rebuild what they don't understand. But I'll make sure they remember. I'll tell them your story. Not the one in their files, the real one. He looked up at the sky, where the stars were beginning to peek through the dark. You taught me something. That it's not the shape of a body or the name of a species that matters. It's the fire we carry. The choice to care, to hurt, to hope. That's what makes someone real. The wind shifted then, just a whisper. A single flake of snow danced upward against gravity, brushing his cheek. He smiled, tears catching in his lashes. He didn't know if it was her, but he chose to believe it was. Behind him, the cold machinery of humanity stirred, busy with its need to measure and dissect. But Elias stayed where he was, grounded by something no probe could scan, no scanner could detect. Grief, gratitude, love. The vault was quiet now, but it had not been conquered. It had been given peace. And Elias Knox, just a soldier, just a man, had stood at the heart of that choice and burned. Asterisk. Days passed, then a week. The ice remained unbroken, stubborn and silent, refusing to give up its secrets. The excavation teams came and went, but beneath their scanners and drills, they found nothing. No trace of the chamber's core, no energy signatures, no remains. The vault had closed itself as though it had never been opened at all. The official reports would later call it a failure of detection, a malfunction in the thermal readings, a misinterpretation of alien artifacts. But Elias Knox knew the truth. The vault had not been sealed by accident. It had been sealed by choice. He stayed long after the others left. volunteering to monitor the perimeter under the pretense of residual radiation. In truth, he couldn't bear to leave. Not yet. The crater had become more than a memory. It had become sacred. A scar in the land that matched the one inside his chest. He built a small cairn of stones beside it, stacking them carefully, each one representing a moment. Her first breath against his chest, her trembling fingers in his hand, the way she had said warmth like it was something holy. He placed his old service badge on the top stone, the insignia scratched and weathered from years of campaigns, and beneath it, carved 3 words into the frost-covered slab. We choose warmth. Each morning, he'd rise and sit beside the Karen with his hands tucked into his jacket, whispering her name like prayer. Sarah. The sound no longer haunted him. It lived inside him now, woven into his blood like a second heartbeat. He'd tell her stories sometimes, about the stars and the places they might have seen together. He told her about Earth's oceans, about mangoes and rainstorms and dogs that chased butterflies with reckless joy. He told her she would have liked them. He told her she would have laughed on the 12th day when the wind was still and the sky was the color of old dreams. Something changed up the snow around the cairn, melted in a perfect circle, a soft shimmer radiating from the base as though a heartbeat passed through the ground. No one else saw it. No scanners recorded it. But Elias felt her dot not alive, not in body, but present, a whisper in the deep, woven not in sound but sensation. I remember you. His throat closed. He stood, his hands trembling. Sarah. He breathed, not expecting an answer, but needing to say it aloud. Are you? There was no voice in his head, no blazing vision, no ethereal light dot, just warmth. A single pulse of heat that moved up from the earth and wrapped around his heart, like arms that no longer had form, only meaning, and he knew. She was part of the vault now, not asleep, not dead, changed, interwoven with the technology of her ancestors, yes, but something more. She had kept a piece of herself alive, not to fight, not to rise again in violence, but to remember, to watch, to protect. And somehow, some way, to stay close to the one who gave her a reason to become more than what she was made to be. Elias dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead to the warm earth. For the first time since she left, he let himself cry, not in grief, but in release, because she wasn't gone. She was part of the song now, a lullaby written in frost and fire. Back on Earth, when he finally returned months later, Elias refused every medal. He turned down promotion, declined interviews, ignored the rumors of alien weapons buried beneath ice. Instead, he gave lectures not on war, but on mercy, on how humanity's greatest power wasn't strength or intelligence or technology. It was the ability to look at something unknown, something strange, and say, I will not fear you. I will not use you. I will warm you. In time, the cairn on Ira 7 became a place of pilgrimage. Some came in silence, some came in tears, but all left. Something behind buttons, old photographs, names scratched onto the stone in 100 languages. And above it all, the words remained. We choose warmth, not because it was easy, but because it was human. And as the stars wheeled across the night, Elias Knox looked up, hand over his chest, and whispered to the cold void that had once held her. You are not forgotten. In the end, that was humanity's greatest triumph, not conquest, not colonization, but memory. We remember. We carry each other forward, even when the fire is gone, even when only frost remains. Asterisk.